Hi everyone, this is me, Ursula, your host of the Books and Mortar podcast, where we talk about the books that build us. So for this particular episode, I have an interesting book called A Wizard of Earthsea by Ursula Le Guinn. This is a very old book that was recommended to me by a person, not by social media. I felt as though I needed to read something a bit different, and I don't know when last I read a book that I didn't see on Instagram. So something that Haruki Murakami said that really stuck with me is that if you only read what everyone else is reading, you'll only be able to think what everyone else is thinking. And sometimes we need to open our minds a little more. So I gave this book a read. This is a story about a boy wizard, right? Let me read the synopsis. Jed, the greatest sorcerer in all Earthsea, was called Sparrowhawk in his reckless youth. Hungry for power and knowledge, Sparrowhawk tampered with long-held secrets and loosed a terrible shadow upon the world. This is the tale of his testing, how he mastered the mighty words of power, tamed an ancient dragon, and crossed death's threshold to restore the balance. And reckless he was, young Sparrowhawk. He was born Guinn in the village of 10 elders on Guinn, and he grew up mostly alone. His mother died when he was born, and his father barely noticed him. So he grew up weedy, but he was tough. His first brush with magic came from his aunt, the village witch, who taught him that power lies in knowing a thing's true name. A bit like the name of the wind, right? But this book came first. And she even taught him a spell to call the goats home, which was very handy in Gaunt, right? And she knew that he had power in him, but wizardry learned from a witch was less than ideal. There was a saying on Gaunt, weak as a woman's magic, and there was another saying, wicked as a woman's magic. Now, the Witch of 10 Elders was no black sorceress, nor did she ever meddle with the high arts of traffic with old power. But being an ignorant woman among ignorant folk, she often used her crafts to foolish and dubious ends. She knew nothing of the balance and pattern which the true wizard knows and serves, and which keeps him from using his spells unless real need demands. It's a pretty sexist world, hey, strangely enough, especially considering that the author is a woman. Still, Guinn learned a lot from his aunt, right? And he proved just how much when the village was attacked. He summoned this thick fog that hid everyone, and it saved them all. And then word of this reached a wandering wizard named Ogion, who came to the village, and he recognized the power in Guinn, and he gave him his true name, Jed. The bronzesmith said to that stranger, "You are no common man." "Nor will this boy be a common man," the other answered. "The tale of his deed with the fog has come to Rivalry, which is my home. I have come here to give him his name, if, as they say, he has not yet made his passage into manhood." Jed left his village with Ogion to learn all he could from the master sorcerer, but he was disappointed. Ogion's magic was a calm sort of magic, one that required a lot of patience and observation and listening, skills that young Jed just didn't have or value in the slightest. "When will my apprenticeship begin, sir?" "It has already begun," said Ogion. There was a silence, as if Jed was keeping something back, keeping back something he had to say. Then he said it. "But I haven't learnt anything yet." "Because you haven't found out what I'm teaching," replied the mage. I love that. Just imagine your teachers at school said that to you. While living with Ogion, Jed met a girl in the fields, right, who asked him if he could summon a spirit of the dead. So being a 13-year-old boy, he of course said, yes, I can. When she asked if he could do a changing spell and he said no, she called him afraid and too young, and his teenage ego did not handle that very well, right? So determined to prove her wrong, he sneaked into Ogion's forbidden books, searching for a self-transformation spell. And he struggled to read it, but what he could make out led him instead to a spell for summoning the dead. As he read it, puzzling out the runes and symbols one by one, a horror came over him. His eyes were fixed, and he could not lift them till he had finished reading all the spell. Then, raising his head, he saw it was dark in the house. He had been reading without any light, in the darkness. He could not now make out the runes when he looked down at the book. Yet the horror grew in him, seeing to hold him bound in his chair. He was cold. Looking over his shoulder, he saw that something was crouching beside the closed door, a shapeless clot of shadow, darker than the darkness. It seemed to reach out towards him, and to whisper, and to call him in a whisper, but he could not understand the words. The door was flung wide. A man entered with a white light flaming about him, a great bright figure who spoke aloud, fiercely and suddenly. The darkness and the whispering ceased and were dispelled. This part reminded me a little of Harry Potter and the Half-Blood Prince, right? When Dumbledore summoned a fire to scare off the inferi attacking Harry. And things that live in darkness always fear the light. So naturally, Ogier berates him for what he's done, right? And he goes, Jed, listen to me now. Have you never thought how danger must surround power as shadow does light? The sorcery is not a game we play for pleasure or for praise. That every word, every act of our art is said and is done either for good or for evil. Before you speak or do, you must know the price that is to pay. Driven by his shame, Jed cried, How am I supposed to know these things when you teach me nothing? Since I lived with you, I have done nothing, seen nothing. Now you have seen something, said the mage, by the door, in the darkness, when I came in. Wisdom comes with age, and Jed simply wasn't there yet. Ogier then tells him that he's not bound to him, and he's free to go to the magic school on Rogue Island where he can learn magic more formally. So Jed decides that he's going to do this, and Ogier takes him. He feels a little guilty about leaving, but he wants practical learning, and Ogier is just not offering him that. So when Jed gets to the school on Rogue, he finds the door. This is the door, the old man said mildly. I am the doorkeeper. Enter if you can. Jed stepped forward. It seemed to him that he had passed through the doorway, yet he stood outside on the pavement where he had stood before. Once more he stepped forward, and once more he remained standing outside the door. The doorkeeper inside watched him with mild eyes. When that failed, Jed stood a long while there on the pavement. At last he looked at the old man who waited inside. I cannot enter, he said unwillingly, unless you help me. The doorkeeper answered, Say your name. Then again Jed stood still a while, for a man never speaks his own name aloud until more than his life safety is at stake. I am Jed, he said aloud. Stepping forward, then he entered the open doorway. Yet it seemed to him that though the light was behind, a shadow followed him in at his heels. When Jed finally makes his way inside, right, he realizes that the door is like far grander from the inside than it looked from the outside. And he meets the archmage, Nemerl, I think that's how you say his name. And he reads Ogier's letter of introduction. So he's admitted to the school, and he's paired with a boy named Jasper, who shows him around. So Jasper is noble-born, and he talks down to Jed. And Jed, who's like super sensitive and proud, takes it deeply to heart, right? And he basically decides on the spot that he will hate Jasper forever and out-magic him one day. As one does, right? So luckily, he also meets Vetch, who becomes a real friend to him. And since no one shares their true names, Jed goes by Sparrowhawk. So Jed turns out to be excellent at his lessons, right? He picks up things really fast, and then one day he gets it into his head to learn something impressive, something that will finally show up Jasper. So he approaches Master Hand, who teaches changing. So all these charms are much the same. Knowing one, you know them all. And as soon as the spell weaving ceases, the illusion vanishes. Now, if I make a pebble into a diamond, and he did so with a word and a flick of his wrist, what must I do to make that diamond remain diamond? How is the changing spell locked and made to last? The Master Hand looked at the jewel that glittered on Jed's palm, bright as the prize of a dragon's hoard. The old master muttered one word, Talk. And there lay the pebble, no jewel, but a rough grey bit of rock. The master took it and held it out on his own hand. This is a rock. Talk, in the true speech, he said, looking mildly up at Jed now. A bit of the stone of which Rogue Isle is made, a little bit of the dry land on which men live. It is itself. It is part of the world. By the illusion change, you can make it look like a diamond, or a flower, or a fly, or an eye, or a flame. But that is mere seeming. To change this rock into a jewel, you must change its true name. And to do that, my son, even to a small scrap of the world, is to change the world. It can be done. It is the art of the master changer, and you will learn it when you are ready to learn it. But you must not change one thing, one pebble, one grain of sand, until you know what good and evil will follow on the act. The world is in balance, in equilibrium. A wizard's power of changing and summoning can shake the balance of the world. It is dangerous, that power. It is almost perilous. It must follow knowledge and serve need. To light a candle is to cast a shadow. He looked down at the pebble again. A rock is a good thing too, he said, speaking less gravely. If the Isles of Earthsea were all made of diamond, we'd lead a hard life here. Enjoy illusions, lad, and let the rocks be rocks. So Master Hand is basically telling Jed that every action has a consequence. Even the small harmless seeming ones. Nothing in the world is insignificant. Everything has its place and its balance. Naturally, Jed is not impressed. In his mind, a truly powerful wizard should be able to do whatever he wants and then just fix the balance afterwards. So Jed's impulsive, he's a little self-absorbed. But again, he's 13, right? There's only so much emotional maturity you can expect from him. He also doesn't have the patience or temperament that real magic requires, and his rivalry with Jasper, which started out completely one-sided, only fuels that. Jed never stops to wonder why Jasper might not like him. He's too caught up in why he hates Jasper. The other apprentices soon learned they could seldom match themselves against Jed, either in sport or in earnest, and they said of him, some in praise and some in spite, "He's a wizard born, he'll never let you beat him." Jasper alone neither praised him nor avoided him, but simply looked down at him, slightly. And therefore Jasper stood alone as his rival, who must be put to shame. He did not see or would not see that in this rivalry which he clung to and fostered as part of his own pride, there was anything of the danger, the darkness, of which the master hand had mildly warned him. Jed hears, but he does not listen, and after he's been at school for a while, he decides in yet another attempt to one-up Jasper that he's going to summon the spirit of a woman who died thousands of years ago. This guy just doesn't learn, right? And of course he announces this to an audience and everyone is watching. And it goes like this. The words of enchantment hissed and mumbled on Jed's lips, and then he cried out aloud and clearly, "Alpharan!" Again he cried the name, Alpharan, and the third time, Alpharan! The shapeless mass of darkness he had lifted split apart. It sundered, and a pale spindle of light gleamed between his open arms, a faint oval reaching from the ground up to the height of his raised hands. In the oval of light for a moment there moved a form, a human shape, a tall woman looking back over her shoulder. Her face was beautiful and sorrowful and full of fear. Only for a moment did the spirit glimmer there. Then the sallow oval between Jed's arms grew bright. It widened and spread, a rent in the darkness of the earth and night, a ripping open of the fabric of the world. Through it blazed a terrible brightness, and through the bright misshapen breach clambered something like a clot of black shadow, quick and hideous, and it leaped straight out at Jed's face. Geez, Archmage Nimel arrives like just in time to save Jed, and Jed survives, but Nimel dies in the process. A sacrifice that he makes partly out of respect for Ogion, whose word he trusted, and if Ogion believed that Jed was worth saving, then Nimel believed it too. When Jed recovers, the new Archmage, Guinn, tells him that he cannot accept his fealty. He knows what Jed did, but not what he is. So Jed insists that he wants to undo the evil that he unleashed, but Guinn basically says to him, well, Nimel couldn't manage it, so, good luck. He warns Jed that he must remain on Rogue, because if the shadow he summoned finds him, it will possess him and use his power for its own ends. So Jed has to stay until he's strong and wise enough to face it, however long that takes. The shadow haunts him constantly, right, even if in his dreams. Meanwhile, his friend Vetch earns his wizard staff and he leaves Rogue, heading home. So before he goes, though, he tells Jed to find him once he earns his own staff. And they exchange their true names. Vetch reveals that he is Estariol and hopes they'll meet again as proper wizards. So when Jed is finally ready to leave school, he encounters Master Doorkeeper again. Jed, you won entrance to Rogue by saying your name. Now you may win your freedom of it by saying mine. So said the old man, smiling, and waited. Jed stood, dumb. Master, said Jed, I cannot take your name from you, not being strong enough, and I cannot trick your name from you, not being wise enough. So I am content to stay here to learn or serve whatever you will, unless by chance you will answer a question I have. Ask it. What is your name? The doorkeeper smiled and said his name, and Jed, repeating it, entered for the last time into that house. When he left it again, he wore a heavy, dark blue cloak, the gift of the township of Low Torning, whereto he was bound, for they wanted a wizard there. He carried also a staff of his own height, carved of yew wood, bronze shod. The doorkeeper bade him farewell, opening the back door of the great house for him, the door of horn and ivory, and he went down the streets of Thwil to a ship that waited for him on the bright water in the morning. Jed had been sent to Low Torning to deal with their dragon problem, right? The dragon of Pendor had spawned, and its offspring were terrorizing the villagers, devouring like people and sheep, just without discrimination. Jed had never seen a dragon before, right, which made this like pretty dangerous for him. And over his years at school, he had grown calmer, and the villagers like regarded him as a grim young man who spoke without pride. Yet in Low Tawning, he was haunted by dreams of the shadow he had released, like always feeling hunted. And terrified it would find him and possess him, he wouldn't stay long in one place. But to leave, he first had to help the village with its dragon problem. So off he went. Like a sword in sharpness, but 5 times the length of any sword, the point of the dragon's tail arched up scorpion-wise over his mailed back above the tower. Dryly he spoke, "I strike no bargain. I take. What have you to offer that I cannot take from you when I like? Safety, your safety. Swear that you will never fly eastward of Pendor, and I will swear to leave you unharmed." A grating sound came from the dragon's throat, like the noise of an avalanche far off, stones falling among mountains. Fire danced along his 3-forked tongue. He raised himself up higher, looming over the ruins. "You offer me safety? You threaten me? With what?" "With your name," he avowed. And the dragon was silent. Remember, if you know a thing's true name, you can wield power over it. And if Jed spreads the word of the dragon's name, that would be very bad for Yavord. So the dragon even offers to tell him the name of the horror following him. But Jed is clever, and he insists that that is not the bargain. He leaves, and Yavord actually keeps his oath to never fly east of Pendor again. Good for our young wizard, hey? No drama, no bloodshed, just like old-fashioned blackmail. Which is impressive, right? Because what can you even threaten a dragon with? And needless to say, the village was thrilled. So Jed leaves, but the shadow's fear grows, like his fear of the shadow, and he can't stay in one place. He boards a boat, but he doesn't know where he's going. And at one port, a man suggests that he go to Oskil, to the court of Terranon, to get a sword that will help him fight the shadow, because he says that the yew staff won't be enough. At the court of Terranon, Jed is attacked again by the shadow, and he's defeated. He wakes to find he's been rescued, and he's been brought to the keep, where he meets Seret, a lady who seems to know him, but Jed cannot remember her. She shows him around the desolate keep, and he notices that very few people come or go, and Jed begins withdrawing into himself, and he only goes out to meet Seret. Then she tells him about a powerful stone, right, that is deep inside the keep, and neither she nor Lord Benderesk can use it. Lord Benderesk is the lord of the keep, right? So she tells him that neither of them can use it, but he can, Jed. And apparently the stone told her that he would come. And Jed's like, "Who, me? No way." And then she says that he could use it to fight the shadow, because only shadow can fight shadow, and only darkness can defeat darkness. I mean, these are just like red flags everywhere, right? We know that light defeats darkness, nothing else. Jed insists that he needs the shadow's name to control and defeat it, right? So Seret says Terranon, the stone, knows everything, and it could tell him what the shadow's name is for nothing in return. And then she starts throwing out those red flags again. Softly she whispered, "You will be mightier than all men, a king among men. You will rule, and I will rule with you." Suddenly, Jed stood up and one step forward took him where he could see, just around the curve of the long room's wall beside the door, the lord of the Terranon, who stood listening and smiling a little. Jed's eyes cleared, and his mind. He looked down at Seret. "It is light that defeats the dark," he said, stammering. "Light." As he spoke, he saw, as plainly as if his words were the light that showed him how indeed he had been drawn here, lured here, how they had used his fear to lead him on, and how they would, once they had him, have kept him. They had saved him from the shadow, indeed, for they did not want him to be possessed by the shadow until he had become a slave of the stone. Once his will was captured by the power of the stone, then they would have let the shadow into the walls, for a Gebeth was a better slave than a man. If he had touched the stone or spoken to it, he would have been utterly lost. He had almost yielded, but not quite. He had not consented. It was very hard for evil to take hold of the unconsenting soul. Phew, that was a close one. So Jed quickly realizes that everyone in the keep, Lord Benderesk and his wife Seret, are slaves of the stone. So Benderesk, annoyed that his wife couldn't get Jed to yield, tries to attack her. But Jed steps in, and then together they make a break for it, right? As they slip through the doorway, though, Jed finally recognizes Seret, and she is, wait for it, the daughter of the witch he met when he was with Ogion. The very reason he read the dark spell in the first place. She was the girl that he met in the field, and it seems as though she hasn't changed much, right? So Jed shifts into a hawk because, he can, and he flies away from Oskel, finally landing on the shoulder of his old mentor, Ogion. He turns back into a human, and Ogion sets about nursing him back to health. But being a hawk for so long is pretty rough, and it strips away your humanness. And honestly, it's like a miracle that Jed is still able to speak. And by the third day, he finally does. And this is what he says to Ogion. I've come back to you as I left, a fool. And then Jed tells him about all of his stories and what he's gotten up to since he left Ogion the last time. And Ogion tells him, those are bitter scars you bear, lad, he said. I have no strength against the thing, Jed answered. Strange, he said. You had strength enough to outspell a sorcerer in his own domain, there in Oskel. You had strength enough to withstand the lures and fend off the attack of the servants of an old power of earth. And at Pendor you had strength enough to stand up to a dragon. It was luck I had in Oskel, not strength, Jed replied. As for the dragon, I knew his name. The evil thing, the shadow that haunts me, has no name. All things have a name, said Ogion. So certainly Jed dared not repeat what the Archmage had told him, that such evil forces as he had loosed were nameless. If the shadow has a name, he said at last, I do not think it will stop and tell it to me. No, said Ogion, nor have you stopped and told it your name, and yet it knew it. On the moors in Oskel, it called you by your name, the name I gave you. It is strange, strange. But I am powerless before it. Is there any place? His voice died away before he had asked the question. There is no safe space, Ogion said gently. Do not transform yourself again, Jed. The shadow seeks to destroy your true being. No. Where you should go, I do not know. Yet I have an idea of what you should do. It is a hard thing to say to you. You must turn around. Turn around? If you go ahead, you keep running. Wherever you run, you will meet danger and evil, for it drives you. It chooses the way you go. You must choose. You must seek what seeks you. You must hunt the hunter. You return to Gaunt. You return to me, Jed. Now turn clear round and seek the very source and that which lies before the source. There lies your hope of strength. There, master? Jed said with terror in his voice. Where? Ogion did not answer. Jed is terrified by the idea, right? And he tells Ogion that if the shadow defeats him again, it's going to take over his mind and his body and use his power as its own. And Ogion is, of course, like, sure, And eventually Jed realizes that it's pointless to keep running. The shadow will always find him, so he might as well face it. So he leaves Ogion and he heads to a place called Ifish. Ifish is where his school friend Vetch said he was born. And there Jed meets Vetch, Esterial, right? And his sister Yarrow, who is quite taken with Jed. So he explains the situation, and Vetch immediately offers to go with him to find the shadow. So they leave Ifish on a boat. It's always on a boat. There's so many boats. He travels by sea so many times in this book. Anyway, then guided by Jed's instincts, they sail out to the open. And this is how the final battle goes. At that, Jed lifted up the staff high, and the radiance of it brightened intolerably, burning with so white and great a light that it compelled and harrowed even that ancient darkness. In that light, all form of man sloughed off the thing that came towards Jed. It drew together and shrank and blackened, crawling on 4 short, taloned legs upon the sand. But still it came forward, lifting up to him a blind, unformed snout, without lips or eyes or ears. As they came right together, it became utterly black in the white mage radiance that burned around it, and it heaved itself upright. In silence, man and shadow met face to face and stopped. Aloud and clearly, breaking that old silence, Jed spoke the shadow's name, and in the same moment, the shadow spoke without lips or tongue, saying the same word, Jed. And the 2 voices were one voice. Jed reached out his hands, dropping his staff, and took hold of his shadow, of the black self that reached out to him. Light and darkness met and joined and were one. But to Vetch, watching in terror through the dark twilight from far off over the sand, it seemed that Jed was overcome, for he saw the clear radiance fail and grow dim. Rage and despair filled him, and he sprang out on the sand to help his friend or die with him, and ran towards that small fading glimmer of light in the empty dusk of the dry land. But as he ran, the sand sank under his feet, and he struggled in it, as in quicksand, as through a heavy flow of water, until, with a roar of noise and a glory of daylight, and the bitter cold of winter and the bitter taste of salt, the world was restored to him, and he floundered in the sudden, true, and living sea. Nearby, the boat rocked on the grey waves, empty. Vetch could see nothing else on the water. The battering wave tops filled his eyes and blinded him. No strong swimmer, he struggled as best he could to the boat and pulled himself up into her. Coughing and trying to wipe away the water that streamed from his hair, he looked about desperately, not knowing which way to look. And at last he made out something dark among the waves, a long way off across what had been sand and now was wild water. Then he leapt to the oars and rowed mightily to his friend, and catching Jed's arms helped and hauled him over the side. Jed was dazed, and his eyes stared as if they saw nothing, but there was no hurt to be seen on him. His staff, black yew-wood, all radiance quenched, was grasped in his right hand, and he would not let go of it. He said no word. Spent and soaked and shaking, he lay huddled up against the mast, never looking at Vetch, who raised the sail and turned the boat to catch the northeast wind. He saw nothing of the world until, straight ahead of their course, in the sky that darkened where the sun had set, between long clouds in a bay of clear blue light, the new moon shone, a ring of ivory, a rim of horn, reflected sunlight shining across the ocean of the dark. Jed lifted his face and gazed at that remote bright crescent in the west. He gazed for a long time, and then he stood up erect, holding his staff in his two hands as a warrior holds his long sword. He looked about the sky, the sea, the brown swelling sail above him, his friend's face. "Asteriel," he said, "look, it is done. It is over." He laughed. "The wound is healed," he said. "I am whole. I am free." Then he bent over and hid his face in his arms, weeping like a boy. And then they go back home to Ifish, where Yarrow is waiting for him. And that is book 1 of A Wizard of Earthsea. It's a book about a boy wizard, sure, but more than that, it's a book about what it means to grow up, what it means to carry power before you have wisdom, and what it costs to learn that every choice, even the small ones, tilts the world a little. This is a quiet book, right? The way it's written, it asks you to slow down, the way Ocean wanted Jed to slow down, and actually sit with its ideas. So this isn't a story about a chosen one who is destined for greatness. It's a story about a boy who breaks something, runs from it, and then finally learns to face himself, literally. And victory isn't about defeating the thing you're running from, but understanding it. It is really a very different kind of fantasy. It's a quiet one, a steady one, a little stern, a little tender, and surprisingly wise. And I'm glad that I picked up something that wasn't recommended to me by Instagram for once. Murakami was right. Sometimes you have to read what nobody else is reading to think a thought nobody else is thinking. I'd like to say thank you to Exclusive Books for giving me this copy of The Earthsea while loaning me this copy of A Wizard of Earthsea to read and to review for you. If it sounds as though it's something you'd be interested in, it is available at exclusive bookstores. And there are 4 books, and this book is actually all 4 in one. So you will be hearing about the rest from me soon. So until then, this is me, your host, Rizia, with a book on the Books and Mortar podcast, where we talk about the books that build us. Bye.